AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Mr. Vasilash.
We missed you last week.
I know. I was at the powertrain conference the SAE puts on. Pretty good conference too, by the way, but I did miss the show.
So basically nothing in history happened on October 3rd in the auto industry. So I don't have a historical question for you. But so we're going to...
Nothing happened historically today?
Nothing happened historically today. So that's Stephanie Brinley,
Hi.
who's S&P Global Mobility.
Yeah. And we got Warren Browne, the famous forecaster and analyst.
So you got some help here because I've reverted to a Dr. Data question for today. Okay, so we've all been poring over the Q3 numbers, and of course I'm a little afraid that Stephanie's probably looking at a Excel spreadsheet of numbers as I present this question to you. Okay, so here it is.
Yes.
Okay, in the third quarter, one Stellantis brand sold 8 more vehicles than Honda sold of one model in the month of September.
Okay. So it's not Fiat.
So you've got one brand, 3 months. You've got one model, 1 month.
Okay. So
and it's a difference of 8 vehicles.
Process of elimination. It's not Fiat because Fiat was way worse than that. It's not Alfa Romeo because Alfa Romeo was way worse than that. And I got to believe Jeep and Ram and Dodge did better than that. So that leaves Chrysler.
No.
Yeah.
No.
What? No. So I want you to so
he wants the vehicle too, doesn't he?
Well, that would be ideal. The vehicle is a tough part. Or what do you think, Warren? Okay, do you see what I'm saying? So
I'm doing the calculations and I can't.
All right. So Alfa Romeo sold 2,049 vehicles in the third quarter. Okay. Honda sold 2,041 passports in September.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So just think about it. That one model sold 8 fewer.
Which is the endorsement?
That's rude.
I guess it's an endorsement of Alfa Romeo, right? No. Okay.
All right. So you see? I mean,
oh yeah. Look, I mean, look, I love Alphas. I think they're beautiful. They're a blast to drive. They can't sell those things. I mean, think about that. A little over 2,000 cars in a 3-month period. I mean, they're barely trickling out the door.
They're barely trickling out the door. And, it's a brand that tried to come back and sort of key areas. Like they understood who they wanted to talk to and who they thought were going to buy it and all of that. And then Stelvio and Giulia haven't had a ton of attention the last couple of years because, that's sort of a Stellantis issue in general.
Right.
And
they added the Tonale.
Which is doing something.
It's not doing
It's
well.
not doing great.
No.
I mean,
and neither is the Dodge counterpart.
Is the Dodge, right.
Okay. This is leading us into a discussion of sales, which is where we wanted to go anyway. The third quarter, Warren, let me throw it out to you. What do you think? Third quarter. Now, let me set the stage. This was the year in January. Everyone was like, whoosh, okay, COVID's behind us, chip shortage is behind us. We have certainty in the market, pent-up demand, and it's not happening. What is going wrong?
Well, look, I think you could never get a better set of, and I'll leave interest rates off for a second. You could never get a better employment situation or a GDP growth situation than we have right now. Okay, and you can go back 6 or 8 years, whatever you want to do. 2.5% economic growth and maximum employment are two really good indicators that kind of prop up a market in any given year, right? Now, then consumers went into the showroom and found a level of pricing now that basically in the last 3 years has gone up quite a bit, right? Everybody wants to get their profit margins up because they got a whole lot of stuff they need to support. So consumers walked in my view, in the third quarter and in the second quarter, walked in, saw the prices, saw reasonable discounts, and then asked the F&I department, what's it going to take to finance this thing? And they left the dealership. I mean, the interest rates and the lack of really aggressive pricing has finally caught up with the market. And it started to catch up in quarter two, absolutely caught up with the market in quarter three. No question in my mind.
So is this the availability of affordable vehicles that, or no, Steph?
It's a little bit more of that everything is. So if you come in from 3 or 4 years ago, it's that jump, that sticker shock is kind of the thing. The median price has gone up quite a bit. And I think when you look at some of the sales, though, I struggle with the affordability because the people who are buying are still spending a lot of money. So I'm like, what's really happening here? Are people totally walking away because they can't, and maybe they don't feel like dropping down to another segment? Are we kind of at a consumer, pent up demand is more or less caught up? We're still uncertain about the election coming up. I think interest rates are probably an even bigger problem than pricing.
That's what I wonder.
I think they're
we've
a
had a
bigger
rate
problem
cut,
than
right?
pricing.
So if I'm in the market, I want to buy a new car or a new house for the same thing, and I'm thinking or reading that, hey, the Fed's going to cut rates, I'm going to hold off. Why buy now if I wait another month or two, maybe another half point comes off, I get a cheaper loan? I wonder if...
Or there'll be a December surprise, and I'll
Yeah.
go in December and see what particular deal that I can get from the manufacturers.
And yeah, I think the incentive part of it is part of it as well. But I think we have to be careful with that idea too, in that if you suddenly start piling on incentives, we know where that goes. That doesn't ultimately really work for
But
the
this
industry
was never
very
going
well.
to happen. Remember when COVID hit and they swore that they would never do that again?
I'm not, there's some incentives
they're
are broken.
kind of-
I know.
They're kind of maintaining,
They're
of all the
maintaining.
promises that have been made,
That's been pretty
they're
solid.
kind of maintaining that promise. Let's look at it at a macro scale. Pick your trend number. Okay? This is 5 years in a row. Sales haven't hit 16 million units in the United States. Not one, not two, 5. That causes me to say, if the pricing philosophy holds, including the incentive philosophy, you kind of have to forget 17 million units as a benchmark target to go after, and you better adjust your plant scale, your capacity utilization to accommodate that. And if you don't, there you go.
And there's still more utilization that can be evaluated.
Look,
but I think we did a lot of that.
Another word is plant shutting,
Yes,
but
a lot of, we did a lot
that's
of
a
that.
dirty word.
Look,
Okay.
I've been saying
I
for a while,
don't-
I think we're at peak auto. I don't think sales will ever go much over 17 again.
I don't know that they'll.
ever.
It's going
Warren,
to be
do
tough
you
to
even
get to
see
17.
Do you see, I mean, you're predicting a 1.4% increase this year from last year. I mean, so that goes up to 15.71 million. I mean, so do you see a 17 number ever?
Through 2030? So we got, 6 years between now and 2030, right? Maybe 1 out of 6.
Maybe.
What-
But I would say that while 17 sounded great and everybody got happy when we were at 17, we didn't always hold it. If you look at, we were at 17 for a couple of years and then we came back down, and then we got to 17 and then we came back down. 17 is driven by incentives. It's not natural demand really, even though we were able to stay in it for a couple of years in a row. That's not where the natural demand really seems to be. I think it is much closer to 16. It's much closer to 16.5 than it is 17. So maybe that's where we're really at.
If you really look at the data, there's been a downward slope since 2007.
Yeah.
If you really do the hardcore analysis.
Despite the fact that the population continues to increase. And to me,
Employment.
this is
I
a
like
danger signal
employment.
for the industry. Population is going up, car sales are not.
We were already pretty saturated. I mean, population going up helps, but you were at 3 cars per household, and maybe we're at 2, or maybe, so there was room to play with that. We aren't looking at a situation where population is going up and you are only at 1 car per household, or you were at less than 1 car per household. So we're saturated to begin with. We can have a few more people without it driving up the sales level, especially for a new car right now.
Adjust to 16.5. Get on with business.
And I think that in a lot of ways the industry itself is doing that, because they are looking at adjusting production more so than leaning into incentives. I mean, we do have outliers.
I don't know about that. Every forecaster was above 16 at the beginning of the year. Everyone in the industry was, including myself. I mean, I stand guilty as charged.
Might have been 16.1, but we weren't really.
So was there any brightness, anything that stood out to you in the third quarter in terms of a model that perhaps did exceedingly well, or type of vehicle that did exceedingly well?
No, and the reason that not one thing sort of jumps out is because at one point a little bit of negative growth, right? You're not really in a space where things are standing out in terms of good things. It's either hold steady. I mean, and right now holding steady is good. I was on the phone with Hyundai earlier this week, and they're like, we have really strong demand. And I looked at it and you're up like 1%. I guess in the scope of things,
better than being down.
Stronger than being down, but it wasn't a super crazy outstanding month.
Right.
So I think holding steady is actually not a bad thing at the moment.
I see a couple of things. RAV4, Maverick hybrids. You can look at the third quarter. I'm not a big quarterly guy. I kind of take the perspective of a year. And if you take the perspective of a year, RAV4 hybrids, Maverick hybrids, Ford's doing well, and RAV4 is doing well. Another one, if you really look at the data for the total year, going to shock you, Asian cars are up. Mm-hmm. As the Detroit 3 continues to drop their models.
And we're talking passenger cars, not SUVs,
like value cars that, hold on, can also be sold in Mexico. But I think that's a positive trend that you have. Civics
are doing well, yeah. And that's a matter of those in that space. It doesn't mean sedans.
Detroit 3 have given them the space.
They've given them the space, but they gave them the space because they weren't profitable at it. And I think you look at a segment like that and you go, okay, maybe not everyone. Like, how many people can be in the segment and still be popular or profitable? You look at the minivan segment.
You mean like SUVs?
SUVs, yeah, but we're running into saturation there. Like, I'm saying that's something to kind of watch going forward. So if they can do it profitably, and again, you alluded to Mexico, it is the fact that Civic and Corolla and K4 and all of these have multiple markets, and the domestics just weren't that great with managing small cars in international markets.
But exactly.
So now General Motors is in the 80% world of the 16.5 million market. They continue to shrink. And my point that I think that I sent you out in the newsletter that I did was, and I appreciate your point, but if they can't compete in the car business, how are they going to compete against the Chinese?
Right.
That's
at some point, you say shrink, I say retreat. They've been retreating all over the world. They're now retreating in different segments
including China.
At some point, you got to put a flag in the mountain and take a stand.
Absolutely.
It's got to be better than it is. Hybrids, I think, are super interesting right now. Maverick hybrids doing well. Like the ones that have them are doing well. But I have a theory.
Well, let's hear it.
I have a theory that it's not really so much that people are opening up the internet and going, I want a hybrid. Like, that's where I'm going next. As they're strolling in, they want the Maverick. And the Maverick hybrid is there, and it's better fuel economy. And it started off as the least expensive one in the lineup. So it was an easy choice.
I agree with that.
Oh, okay, it came in. CR-V, RAV4, the same thing. Honda and Toyota both have spent 25 years figuring out how to really get hybrids in the right space, how to make it sit nicely in the product mix, how to have it perform as well as consumers want, how to make it not be a trade-off and not be more expensive. Then it's not at the top most expensive vehicle in the lineup. So you walk into a RAV4 dealership and the hybrid's the one's there, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm good. Same with CRV. So, and there are some people who are looking for hybrids. There's never goes to zero, but I really feel like a lot of these people are just walking in and going, this works. They're going to walk out and be happy. I don't think they're getting something that they don't like or something that is just being shoved on them in a negative way. But I don't think that it suggests that that a hybrid is what people are looking for. The second part of that, however, is regulations mean that electrification is happening in one way, shape, or form. We're going to move to more hybrids anyway because we need it.
Okay,
for
but
regulation.
we're gonna move there.
Yeah.
Because they walk into the showroom and they see a $25,000 vehicle that's ICE, and they see a comparable, and I mean equal, BEV for $35,000, and go, what does that one do again? And the salesman, I believe in your theory, I will add an additional one. The salesman that has the hybrid, or the sales lady that has the hybrid, says, well, don't leave. Let me show you the hybrid.
Yeah.
If you want the fuel economy, if you want the range, okay, and you're anxious, but you heard about all these BEVs, please don't leave the showroom. Here's a hybrid. Yeah. And Toyota is a major, Toyota's made hybrids for 20 years now. They got it perfected. So,
well, I was going to say that 48% of their sales in September, 48% were electrified, which basically in terms of Toyota, I mean, the BZ.
Well, they have a number of lines too where you can only get a hybrid.
Right.
Well, the Camry.
The Camry
is just a hybrid.
I think Sienna is the same way.
Camry, Sienna, Crown.
Venza.
Venza. Well, Venza
does not bode well for General Motors,
which does not happen.
So why? Okay, so you have experience at General Motors. I mean, what is your sense of what happened there? I mean, earlier on, we were talking earlier about the Volt, and that General Motors was
should have kept it, but okay,
and
should have kept the Bolt, but
they had the 3-mode hybrid that they developed with Mercedes.
Yeah,
and
that
BMW
was less effective.
And Chrysler.
Yeah, I mean, and so they were in the mix. Why?
Look, I'm the odd guy out on this. A lot of people have argued that it's really the government that's forcing manufacturers to do things they didn't want to do. I don't believe that at all. I believe that Mary and Farley came out and said, we're going to be all electric by 2035. We're going to chase Tesla and we're going to beat them. And the government looked at them and said, well, they think that they can do it. So when we come out with the new regulations, they've already said they can do it. This is way before the EPA came out with their standards. They were chasing Tesla and Tesla's stock price. The government said, well, they can do it. So let's put it up here. And then when it was put up, there's a different story now.
Yeah, they all had heart attacks.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but they asked for it. And I've written a couple of articles on this.
Well, they did, but this was before the market reality slapped them in the face.
And they weren't the only ones saying it. It's not like just Mary Barra and just Jim Farley said, oh, I'm going to go electric. This was the narrative. In 2019, 2020, going into COVID, it was 2018 auto shows. It was all about how do you do both? Going to have some ICE, going to have some electric, we've got to do everything. And this is where we're going to go with it. Something in the water in 2020 and 2021. And actually part of it was U.S. getting back into the Paris Climate Accord. That was part of it. That changed some of the dynamics, and the regulations in Europe and China were getting crazier as well. And in this little period of about 18 months, it flipped. And every announcement was, nope, okay, we've got it now. We're all on board. We can do this. And part of it was Tesla, because Tesla was growing. They were building more cars and they were selling more and they were having this fantastic growth. And for some reason, even now, people can't figure out they don't sell cars, they sell technology. And they're like, whoa, we have to go after this Tesla. And that was definitely driving a lot of things, but it was the wrong target. I think. And then you come into this, and if you look at BEV adoption in 24 and 25, I think I've said this here before. I didn't think that 24 was going to be it's important that it continues to go forward, but it isn't the year that tells you what consumers are going to do with BEV. Neither is 2025. We don't have infrastructure yet. We don't have education yet. We don't have the number of choice that we need. We have a lot more choice than we did, and there's a lot of really good choices out there, but there's not enough yet. So we're still pushing on the rope here. We're still trying to get over this.
But the thing we do have is BEV plants.
Right.
Yes.
We've
But
got what do you need?
I still say, as a segment, the BEV story is still a positive story.
It's still
in
a
the US.
positive story.
We're going to sell more than we did last
Yes.
year, and we're going to sell more next year than we did this year. And so, with all these problems, there's still over 1 million people going into showrooms and say, "I want an electric car." I think that's extremely positive.
It's just not going as fast as this
Correct.
period, which I wasn't comfortable with the
here's
idea
my
that it was going to go that
question.
fast anyway.
For
but-
you guys, GM is on the cusp of hitting a run rate of 50,000 BEVs a quarter.
Mhm.
They came very, very close in the third quarter. They keep their momentum. They're going to end the year, which was part of their guidance. We're going to be at a 200,000 a year run rate. I know this is over multiple models, but GM has got this Ultium platform. Everything's built off the Ultium battery, the Ultium platform. Is that going to be enough volume where they can start to make money on electrics?
It should be.
No.
I think there's potential there. And one of the things that when I think about Ultium too is when you look at what's on the market today, it's still being evolved. And so I think one of the cool things about Ultium is it's not just about the product platform that's here today. It's that just like everyone else, they're learning and building, and the next generation is going to be that much better. And they've already figured out the multiple platforms, and it doesn't mean that somebody else can't be successful with a different strategy, but I think they've picked one that is going to work out well for them. Do they need to revisit plugins and get into that space in the US? They probably do, but that doesn't mean that Ultium is wrong.
Right.
Oh,
So I want to hear Warren's counterpoint, but then I want to come back to you, Steph. So you don't think they're going to be able to make money on their BEVs at 200,000 a year?
remember, part of that's Honda volume.
Correct, it is, but it's
Okay.
still GM volume.
I don't know what the negotiated price is, but I'll come at it from a different perspective. I got a plant in Canada that's not even coming close to what, 30% utilization.
You're talking Bright Drop?
Right. I got Orion that's empty.
Right now.
I got Canada. You know, at some point in time, you gotta get that volume up. They're not going to use incentives to get that volume up. You can't sell $96,000 Silverados. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't need a plant for that, or a $96,000 Sierra pickup truck. You don't. You need a Bolt, and you never should have dropped it, in my view, speaking to General Motors. So, no, Gerald Johnson said, I need 1 million units by 2026.
That's not
And I agreed with him.
Gerald
On
Johnson
that,
being the head of GM
The head of GM
manufacturing.
Manufacturing. Smart guy, led General Motors manufacturing in both Europe and for the globe. He picked a number which I agreed with in terms of, what do I got to do to begin to make money? I don't think I have 1 million units in the General Motors BEV forecast through 2030.
Wow.
when we get there.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I'm curious about, you're saying 200,000 run rate that they're going to have.
You
Yet.
just said 250,000 this year.
Okay, but the thing of it is that they basically only sold, they've sold under 80,000 this
Yeah,
We
year.
still
no, but if
have-
you look at the third quarter, they sold, including the Honda volume, which I think is important from a manufacturing
Absolutely.
standpoint, because it's GM doing that manufacturing. They had what, 46,000 BEVs sold in the third quarter. So I believe they'll finish the fourth quarter.
All right, so I'm looking at the release right now. GM's US EV sales Q3 24, 32,095 vehicles.
It's adding in the others.
Okay, and then in the second quarter it was
Right.
21,930.
Right, and
They'll do 110 sales this year.
And you said how many?
GM.
39,000?
Yeah.
No, 32.
32,000. And then there's about 15,000 Hondas in there or something like that.
Well, but
A
this
little
is
less than
General
that,
Motors.
yeah.
so,
Oh, for the
right,
quarter
it's
is,
counting General
yeah.
Motors.
Well, they
And-
finesse the
and-
production versus sales number. They always do. And they
Right,
finesse
but,
the
but there's
250.
a pretty big delta between 200,000 and 110.
I think some of the bright spots for the rest of the year is Equinox EV is just coming up, and Silverado is going to get mid-price ones as well.
No,
They're not
yeah.
going to just stay at 96,000. And I don't disagree with any of those statements, but I think that the situation is you have to think about further out, and we have to get over this chasm. And it's here, and it was on paper, and for years you're going to hit a point where BEV buyers, you're going to slow down, and you're going to have the point that we're at, and it's here. And there's a lot of like, what? How did that happen? Well, it was in the math. It was there. And there is an entirely realistic opportunity that BEV turns out to be 30% of the market and just sort of sits there for another 10 years. That might be what we have, in spite of regulations saying that we're supposed to get someplace. And that's super challenging from a profitability standpoint. I recognize that. But that might be what reality is. As we talk about regulations, as we talk about investment, as we talk about chasing Tesla, consumers were the wild card, and that's who's holding it up right now, regardless of why. Whether it's because of price, whether it's because of all the things that are being worked on and fixed and just take 5 years to do, they were the wild card.
Yeah.
A little bit of the snooker too is I think in my numbers, I actually have Hyundai, Kia, Genesis selling more BEVs than General Motors this year.
I think that might be right. Although,
I mean, just think about that. And
They're
they're
doing really well.
imported mostly.
For now.
take
now,
away the
yes,
lease.
right.
Take away the lease. And,
No, you can't because it's in the law.
Yeah.
But
I think
I
there's
want to go
opportunity
back
there.
to, because I told you, Stephanie, I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah.
GM needs hybrids. Is that what this tie-up with Hyundai is about? I was shocked when they announced that they were going to work with
I was a
Hyundai.
little surprised by that
And
one.
not shocked that GM would go to them, but maybe that Hyundai would agree to work
It was an
with them.
interesting. That tells me actually that the most important thing about that is it's not necessarily that the automakers have to consolidate, right? That's been the story for a while. They have to consolidate or else they can't survive. There's other ways to do it. You can partner on more specific things, and GM's more willing to do that. Hyundai hasn't partnered a lot before, so their involvement is super interesting. They need to get back into some hybrids. The question of whether or not they have to do it with somebody else, it comes down to the scale of the manufacturing. I think that's where that comes in, because they are still doing some hybrids in China. They didn't suddenly when they stopped building the Volt, they didn't take the engineering drawings and throw them into the trash. They know how to do it.
They actually knew how to do it on the Silverado.
And they knew how to do it on the Silverado. They did it on that institutional knowledge didn't get thrown. Malibu had mild hybrid. So I think that the tie-up is more about what can we do to make some of the components and get to some scale that way, and maybe save a little bit of time on catching.
Do you think
up.
that's what the Hyundai deal is for hybrids?
Mm-hmm. I think it's that more than anything else.
Yeah.
Maybe they just didn't want to go to Toyota.
Maybe.
Who knows how that.
But why didn't they go to Honda? I mean,
Or
because they're already
Ford,
working
or
with Honda on
fuel cells,
and they, Honda's got good hybrid technology, and they work together with them. Remember the Saturn Redline, which had the
even more than that,
engines.
the Honda Prologue.
The Honda Prologue,
and they were going to do GM Cruise in Japan with Honda.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Honda GM partnership has unraveled. I'm just guessing. I think that
there was going to be product swaps both ways that came unraveled. Actually,
something went bad with that, and Honda said. Now, another thing that might have been is there's not really consolidation happening in Japan, but I believe the Ministry of International Trade and Industry has come to the automakers and said, look, we're going to get our clocks clean. Toyota, you're going to take care of Mazda. You're going to take care of Subaru. Honda and Nissan, why don't you guys get together? And Mitsubishi, you're part of Nissan. So I think that's how they've grouped those things. And it wouldn't surprise me if Honda said to GM, hey, look, we got to go with Nissan, sayonara.
When the GM Honda announcement about the affordable car going away, that was about October last year. because we went to the Tokyo Motor Show just after, and in a roundtable talking to Honda's CEO, excuse me, of course it came up because it was 3 days before that the announcement came out. But his response at that time was, the reason was because we didn't see the ability to make an affordable BEV because the battery's still costing us 10 grand. There's nothing they couldn't get. They didn't really think they could get the battery small enough, is what his point at that moment. And what they were looking at was in this time frame between now and 2030, and between these products that are coming in the next couple of years, not necessarily forever, you can't get it low enough, but in these next couple of years, we're not going to be able to get the battery small enough to be able to, and cheap enough to be able to make it affordable. And so why do the program? There may be much more to all of this than that, because everything is multi-layered. So. But that was the initial Honda comment.
Tell it to the Chinese that you can't get batteries cheap enough.
And then you bring in a whole other set of numbers in there. But
hey, look, we're going to have to take a quick commercial break. We want to do. I want to ask you guys about Stellantis when we come back too. So a shout out to our great sponsor, Bridgestone.
Performance that shines even in the rain. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Potenza tires, improved grip in wet conditions.
All right, thank you for that, Bridgestone. We're back.
You're talking Stellantis. Fiat did well.
Stellantis,
they were up 118% in
they
the
sold, what,
first quarter.
312 cars over 3 months. It's incredible. I have never seen the wheels come off a car company as fast as they have at Stellantis. A year ago, we were going, oh my gosh, this guy Carlos Tavares, he's a miracle worker. He turned, he got Peugeot going again. He got Opel going again. He's got double-digit margins for a full-line manufacturer in the American market. This guy's a whiz kid. And now, kablamo. The dealers hate him. The union hates him. His employees hate him. The Italian government wants to string him up. And the board of directors says, yeah, we are looking for a replacement when his contract expires. I don't think he's going to get to the end of his contract. He has wiped out in this year, what was the number, Sean? $34 billion in market cap? 34, in January, their market cap was $70 billion. It's about 35 right now. I have never seen things go south so fast. And I'm thinking, if I'm on the board of directors, I've got to show everybody, the shareholder, I'm doing my fiduciary duty. We got to boot this guy out of here before it really collapses. What do you guys think?
I think that he underestimated North America, not in its importance, but in the level of attention that it needed. It seemed to be that the other brands and the other things were getting a little bit more attention, and North America knew how to do it.
Yeah.
But North America is also in a period where it doesn't have as much product as it had before, and we talked about the Alfa Romeos getting old. That's been an issue for these brands under multiple ownership. Probably worse under Fiat, but still, that's part of the problem. The products aren't getting refreshed fast enough. Stellantis is on the verge of having a really good multi-energy solution, but it's not here yet. And so, can you kind of get through? And while they thought they were getting through to this, they let inventory get too high. Pricing came up. And if you look at Wrangler and Gladiator pricing a little bit too, I think that Bronco and Wrangler are pretty much a segment of their own, right? Toyota 4Runner plays in there a little bit. And what you really see is that segment's not that big. And so they're eating each other up, because it's not like Broncos, it's still seeing up and down months. It's been very inconsistent. And Wrangler is older than Bronco, so it's got a little bit of a disadvantage there, but there isn't this magic, 600,000 unit market of people that want off-road Wranglers in that style of vehicle. So I think that's been a challenge. Having one competitor is a challenge. I think that's a lot of where Stellantis is at, but upsetting the union and upsetting employees and everybody at the same time.
But isn't the problem stuff that they really don't have any new product?
Yeah.
I mean, the Wagoneer was basically, across the board. I mean, what do they have? What does FCA have that was introduced in the last year that was new?
Yeah. I think it's I think it's more than that. I think to take it from the top, there are contractual agreements that you could do with the UAW. Never looked at the language, but I looked at the reporting. I think that there's a huge trust issue there that may go beyond. I mean, Stellantis may be right on the contract and lose the war on that one. Two, they've had a number of recalls on that Wrangler and fires that have hurt them. Certainly hurt their production, okay? But I'll go one more. It's the same problem that we faced when I was at General Motors. And I'll give them a little bit of advice here. Too many brands. You got to feed Alfa Romeo. I don't care where it comes from.
Yeah.
Right.
The marketing people still need the attention, the focus, the pricing, and the delivery to the customer. Fiat,
Yeah.
okay. Chrysler, okay. Next year, Chrysler will have an airflow. Wow. They did to Chrysler what General Motors did to Saturn, bled it, product dry. So, look, you can pick on any one particular product. Ram should be selling a little more, and I agree with your comment on the Wrangler. Look at Stellantis's brands in North America and the focus. We had too many children to feed at General Motors. We couldn't feed Saturn and Geo and Pontiac and Oldsmobile and Chevrolet and Cadillac. And Stellantis can't feed Chrysler, Alfa Romeo, and Fiat and do a decent job to get that share back. So I would encourage them, they're not my customer, but I would encourage them, look at your brands here and get more focus.
So what would you keep? I mean, so they've got Jeep, Ram, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, Alfa.
Cool. What's wrong with having Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? What's wrong with that? Nothing.
I don't disagree with that, actually. And back when we were Fiat Chrysler, and they were Fiat Chrysler, and Sergio was around, I didn't really understand bringing Fiat and Alfa in to the U.S. and saying, okay, we're going to have this little car over here, we're going to have this thing over here, and then we're going to take Chrysler, that at the time was still on that sort of near luxury premium thing, and we're going to take it and we're going to make it mainstream, because that's what we do. We take profit and we take margin away. We make it mainstream, people mover, and we're going to put Dodge in this whole thing, and somehow you're going to move everybody through those brands. A consumer may go from a small car to a sedan to a truck to an SUV to all of that through their life, but they don't necessarily go from Fiat to Dodge. You don't even go from Dodge to Chrysler.
I totally agree. And
they don't have cars. Never really made, and now they don't have cars. But even at that point, I thought I didn't really understand how you were going to keep everybody together. Now, while Ram and Dodge have had good years, I still would maintain that splitting those two from the get-go hasn't been a disaster, but I don't think it's gained them anything.
But
truly,
but they didn't do it from a distribution standpoint.
No, the distribution was the same, but your marketing point is there.
The vice president of marketing only has so much attention span.
Yeah.
Okay. He has only so many meetings, so many hours in the day. Okay. And so fall on your sword, get rid of Alfa Romeo. Okay. And fall on your sword and get rid of Fiat. Okay. If you're going to do Chrysler,
do it.
Then you better do something different. Okay. Yes, sure. They have Pacifica and it's a great vehicle. But Chrysler used to be a whole bunch of different product lines. It stopped being a premium product line long time ago.
Could you feed it with Peugeot product?
No.
Could. Could. As long as you built it here.
And we designed it. I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I think it was surprising, you're talking about Dodge. So in the third quarter, Dodge sold 26,559 vehicles. Okay. And so that's over Hornet, Charger, Challenger, Durango.
Yeah, some of that is
not in production.
It's going away. Some of that is the going away stuff that I think.
But Chrysler sold 22,482. So basically, just 4,000 difference between the two, and it has, as you basically said, it has one vehicle now.
Right. So what's saving Chrysler? The way that Stellantis, give them total credit, the way they organize their distribution system in the United States, where they put all those brands in one showroom.
Yeah.
So the Dodge person can very easily send it down to the 4 booths later and sell a Chrysler Pacifica. If they were separate, they would have been dead already. My point is Stellantis big enough to have 5 brands?
Not in the
That's
U.S.
not-
market.
Right.
But
That's
they weren't at FCA.
Huh?
They weren't at FCA either. Fiat to me was
But
like
the chickens have come home to roost now. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to throw something else on top of my observation of what's gone wrong at Stellantis. Chrysler, let's call it Chrysler, was a beautiful industrial machine.
Mm-hmm.
Highest margins in the business of any full-line manufacturer worldwide. Double digits. Cash generator accounted for 60% of the profits at Stellantis. If I'm a manager, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I help these guys? How do I keep this machine running? How do I oil everything? How do I make sure that it's perfectly tuned up? What did Carlos come in and do? He started slashing and burning. You guys have the highest costs. We're going to outsource this to Morocco. We're going to move this stuff out to India. We're going to take all this stuff out. All you guys that were running everything that made all the profits, you're out of here. You don't know what you're doing. And he took this beautiful industrial machine and he broke it. I agree with everything that you guys have said about pricing and inventory and the product line. But I think this guy is got cost-cutting mania. And I'm not against cost-cutting. I think it's extremely important.
Yeah.
But if it's your single largest source of profits, you don't go in and start cutting like crazy.
Right.
And I think that's been his fundamental mistake. And I think it's another reason why he's going to get thrown out of there. I mean, so Warren, they hit over 100 days supply. And it was at the end of last year. Didn't somebody in Auburn Hills say, hey guys, we're up to 70 days. Hey, we're up to 80 days. We're up to 90 days. I've said this on the show before. My reading and talking to people is nobody wanted to point this out because they knew they were going to get their head chopped off.
Well, I will. Going through the bankruptcy times, I have a perspective. We've made an agreement with the UAW. We have a profit objective. We have to keep the plants running. We have to thin the fixed cost, right? And so you get into a world where you got to keep the plant running.
Right. But you're talking about...
And so
you're talking
keep
about
the
a
production going.
I know, but
Because you
That's
book the profit.
not
correct,
always-
correct,
You book
correct.
the profit.
You booked the profit, but you're talking about a time, the bankruptcy, when, I mean, it was cheaper for General Motors to build a car than to not build a car. That's how upside down their finances were. I'm talking about this beautiful industrial machine that's the most profitable in the business. And boy, and that's what I talk about, keeping it tuned up. You see inventory getting out of hand, you throttle back on production, maybe you do a little bit more incentives, you do something, but you don't let it get out of hand, and they let it get out of hand.
Could have been-
And then in June came back and said, well, the Americans don't know how to sell things.
Well,
Oh, listen,
that's a cultural distinction between Europe and North America that's existed.
But I-
but
but
it
for
goes
some time.
beyond sales, because
It
I've
does.
talked to engineers
It
there,
does.
and they told me their perception is that Stellantis is telling them the stupid Americans don't know what they're doing, and we've got to come fix it.
Oh,
And it wasn't broken.
And it
God.
wasn't broken.
And it wasn't broken. And I think there is that it does kind of go back a little bit to the different view that Tavares has. But that's who Stellantis chose. They chose a guy who got his way up by cost cutting.
Look, and
I mean,
book
and so are we
the
surprised?
profit.
He
I
looked
can't
brilliant
make
until a year
Spain
ago.
angry again. Keep the plant running.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Okay.
isn't the issue that the consumers are just not buying their products?
Yes.
I mean, there's all these other problems, but I mean, it's just like basically, okay, is there something that is sufficiently compelling for customers to go in and buy lots of something from them? And we're not seeing it. So I don't know if that's all Tavares' problem. I mean,
No, you can't blame
no,
him
like,
on
it's-
everything.
Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer that we talked about, like, had so many production problems that they weren't able to really kind of get it going. And
Wrangler.
going Grand Wagoneer
flipping compass from around the
all over the place. And going to the $110,000 Grand Wagoneer, I don't think the market's ready for that, but not ready for that was a little bit risky. But you put on top of that having production issues that meant you couldn't build enough of them anyway. You couldn't even weigh yourself, because the $60,000 to $80,000 Wagoneer is fine. There's nothing wrong with that pricing, and you still could have accepted that production issues were affecting both of them. So you had 2 years of a product that was supposed to be doing great, and once they started building them, it did start picking up. That does not help this whole scenario. You go drill into the problems that make it a little bit worse.
Right. I mean, what I think about is that, you were mentioning the Maverick hybrid, and people were going into Ford stores all of a sudden and saying, wow, I really want to buy one of these things. Or when the Bronco came out,
pricing, yeah.
People said, gee, I really want one of these things. And so it built sort of a vibe for the Ford brand that was highly positive. And my question comes, where's the vibe for FCA?
Well, there's stuff in the pipeline, but that's what I wanted to ask you about first, Warren. This extended range pickup truck, the Ram Charger, going to have 600 miles range, something crazy. It's a lot. It can tow, it can haul. Is a traditional pickup buyer, in your opinion, going to say, yeah, that's the EV truck for me? It's got a gas engine and plenty of range and towing. Or are they going to say, I'm going to stick with my tried and true pure ICE truck?
Well, I look, if the pricing is right, remember General Motors promised the $35,000 Equinox and advertised it on TV, and they still haven't actually have they put it into the dealer yet? I don't know. But they advertised that on TV in Detroit 4 months ago. And all the reporters wrote about the $35,000 Equinox that's coming. What happened to the $39,000 Silverado EV?
Yeah.
Where did that go? Okay. So my point is, I think it's a very interesting alternative because it provides the towing horsepower that's required and the flip, the huge generator that it flips to get that extended range vehicle. If the pricing is right, I think they'll have a good vehicle, just like they will with Charger. Charger could be the future of what muscle cars are. Horsepower and BEV.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think, Steph? E-Rev pickup? Is a traditional buyer going to go for it?
Yes and no. And I say that because there are limits to that. It can tow 10 or 11,000, but there's still pickup truck buyers that need more. So it doesn't answer every pickup truck buyer's need. And there's still a chasm in that part of the market as well. It has the potential to be the thing that gets them there. But I still think it's going to be part of the mix, especially for the next few years. Hopefully it's dominant, maybe, but I don't know that it will be, because when you look at Ram, you do have variations all the way through in complexity. So
will it sell at $70,000?
Why not? I mean,
it'll sell like lightning sells.
I think it has potential to do a little bit better than lightning, depending on pricing is important. But $70,000 for a full size pickup is not crazy right now.
It's not crazy.
No. So I said,
that I don't think is a terrible price.
All right,
where's
John,
the 100,000 light?
Let me ask you this question. Okay, so Warren mentioned the Charger has the possibility of being all that and more. And we're talking about the Ram Charger, the E-Rev. Okay, so the guy who was running both of those brands, Tim Kuniskis, suddenly leaves. Now, if this were the future and it was all going to be bright and shiny, would he have left?
I think this comes back to this whole Carlos Tavares thing of the Americans don't know what they're doing, and they're not cutting costs fast enough, and we have to cut cost. And so you guys, you're out of here. I'd love to know if Tim left of his own accord, if he left because he was frustrated. I mean, look, this is a guy that The people in Chrysler loved him.
Mhm.
The dealers loved him. The customers
And he
loved
got,
him.
I'll give you three
another
examples.
brand 3 months before. he left.
Cultural bridging
Yeah.
is an Achilles heel of the automobile business that needs to be recognized. Remember the
Mhm.
merger of equals?
Mhm.
Which
Okay.
turned out it was not at all. It was a takeover.
No, but the cultural differences between a German organization, I lived this with Opel and with Chevrolet, that's not new, and that exists, and it takes a leader, a real leader, to break through that cultural difference.
Dr. Z.
Okay. Well, no, it
And-
really
and-
does. You have to recognize it. I mean, at Opel, the Opel German engineers, who were great engineers, said, well, yeah, that's the minivan for the United States. We need a whole bunch of more engineering money and tooling to make the one that the Germans really want. And when you really spliced it, and Lutz did a great job at clearing that clutter, a really good job of clear. There's only one engineering budget. It's my engineering budget. I heard him say that multiple occasions. Okay. But the cultural differences exist, and you have to break through that with leadership. Otherwise, you're going to get what
Yeah.
It's not insignificant. And the real leaders recognize that.
And that's where you're getting, if the word on the street is Tavares is saying the Americans don't know what they're doing, that's the cultural issue in there. And under Sergio Marchionne, that was much less of a problem. The company did operate.
No, the Italians and Americans got along pretty well.
They did pretty well.
And-
I
and
wouldn't say
I'm
that
not
was perfect, but they did pretty
just
well.
so I'm clear, I don't believe Tavares ever said the Americans don't know what they're doing. It is the impression of the handful of engineers that I've talked to that that's the attitude at Stellantis in Paris.
And I it may be part of the attitude. It might be just cultural differences in the way that they're talking to one another. It could be that simple in some ways.
Yeah.
It may not actually be true disrespect of one another. It could be the way.
Except that
but
they're
to Warren's
gutting
point,
Auburn Hills. They're getting rid of thousands of people and moving them to low-cost country, or moving those jobs to low-cost
which is a
countries.
different issue than whether or not you think the Americans can do it or not. That's a cost-cutting issue. That goes back to the cost-cutting issue.
Right.
But Warren's right for sure that cultural issues maintain. I mean, what we're talking 4 years into 21, we're talking 3 years into this. In 3 years, you really think you can solve all cultural problems? And this is a massive thing to do.
Listen, there's even cultural differences when one American company buys another American company. There's a culture crash because those cultures at those companies have been different. Now throw in something from a different country and you've just exacerbated
and in some ways, to see Stellantis have some struggles in 3.5 years into this merger doesn't mean it can't be successful going forward, and is not an entire shock because of what they're trying to do, the number of things that they're trying to put together. You don't easily merge two companies, and companies that size to run into some hiccups at some point is not a shock, and they wouldn't have come up in the first 6 months.
Yeah,
cultural awareness is an Achilles heel of the automobile business, especially between Europe and North America. If you go and look, I'll just close on this. If you go look at some of the major joint ventures, even outside of the automobile business, and you study those, I teach this at LTU, okay? It's the cultures that couldn't merge. And so all of that balance sheet value that was in the merger gets wiped away because the leadership can't coach the team on how to overcome that. It's an Achilles heel. It really is. That needs.
Which one has been successful? I'm trying to think of one that, like, on a long term, that really has worked. Because Renault,
merger?
The cultural.
Would you argue that when Chrysler took over AMC,
that's the one.
Oh, okay.
That's the
because
one.
Renault Nissan is struggling.
The cultural difference between Southfield and Detroit. I'm not sure. Well, I think you were talking about beyond the culture, beyond the border here.
Yeah, on the
right?
border. I mean, yeah, they're
Very difficult to find one.
it's very difficult to find one that's gone long enough to still be around.
I would say we'd be hard pressed to find any. I mean, look,
That's where
pick
I'm
on
at.
Ford for a minute. Mazda, disaster. Aston Martin, disaster. Volvo, disaster. I mean, they never made a dime off any of that stuff. GM bought what? Suzuki, Saab, Isuzu. Got nothing out of it. Zip, zilch.
They turned Daewoo into GM Korea,
So
and that hasn't been bad for them.
yeah, maybe you could argue that
That
BMW.
was Nick Riley, though. That's leadership. If you study the issue, it's Nick Riley demanding it.
BMW getting Bentley. That might, although they're in trouble right now, Bentley is. Mercedes with Rolls-Royce, or excuse me, Volkswagen with Rolls-Royce.
Other way around.
Which
Volkswagen with Bentley.
Volkswagen,
BMW
Bentley,
with Rolls-Royce.
BMW. Excuse me, I got that mixed up. That's right.
But yeah,
So I would say
those
BMW,
have largely been
BMW, Rolls-Royce
Yeah.
is arguably worked. I can't think.
See,
of
but isn't
anything
this
else.
this is still European though? And so we're talking about
No, I said American and Japanese didn't work.
German and English.
right. So my AMC thing then holds.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, but here's my question to you. Okay, so if there is no evidence that partnerships or takeovers of Europeans in American companies, does this basically mean that American companies ought to stick to their knitting and really focus on what they should be doing and focus on the American market and not worry about other parts of the world? Or is the world sufficiently interconnected such that, boy, if you're not looking at the other parts of the world, you're going to get your ass handed to you?
Well, I think it's the latter.
Stephanie's
I think it's
nodding
the
her
latter.
head.
Well, I think it's the latter, but look, I'll go back. Cross-cultural diversity. You look at the State Department. Okay, I learned about the State Department because I talked to all the embassies when I was in all the countries that I operated in. Right? They send their folks away for 6 months for language training, for cultural training, for other leadership training before they're ever sent to their overseas assignment. At General Motors, it was, well, they did a little bit of it. Not 6 months. And certainly you learned the language once you were over there. Here's your plane ticket. Okay. So it can be overcome. Leadership, training, switching people between the cultures that are on their way up in the organization. Akio and Hogan. When they finally got to that level, they understood one another. Now, it wasn't always successful in terms of Toyota and General Motors, but taking people from Switzerland and moving them to Poland so they understood the Polish culture was part of what we did at General Motors in Europe. And so I think don't eliminate, don't become so North American cloistered that you'll run your company into the ground. Okay? It's a leadership issue.
And
it's the 21st century. Globalization. Oh, hello. Cross-cultural. Get to it.
And to your question, Gary, about just paying attention to what you know, the issue is not whether or not you can figure out how to build a car for Europe. The issue is that communication between the two companies.
Absolutely.
So it's really, the product isn't the problem. It's the leadership and the communication and the cultural interactions between them that are holding things up. And if you're not understanding the other side and you're not able to think about it from the other side's view, then things are getting blocked. More so than can either version of this company come up with the right car for the right product. They can do that, but they need to work together on it. And that seems to be where, and mergers in general, where that's a problem.
I'll give you an example. Dieter Zetsche came over. He kind of became American, right? In terms of the ads that he did and kind of the comical nature. And I think he actually studied it. biggest mistake, they just sent him back home. It was time.
Yeah.
It's time for him to go home. Maybe it is. Maybe 2 or 3 years or 4 years in an assignment is not how you bridge cultural diversity.
Mhm.
I put that when I teach my globalization class at LTU. I put that at the top of the list in terms of how you're going to be successful in a global enterprise. That's my opinion.
And it's on the list in every MBA class, but somehow it doesn't actually translate to being done.
Because you don't understand how we do it here.
I don't.
So, Gary, closing thoughts?
I'm still sort of looking for the shiny thing within what we've talked about here, and I'm having a difficult time finding it.
Yeah. Steph, closing thoughts?
That's a good question on the shiny thing. Given the uncertainty and kind of the issues that the industry is facing in general, if we come up with a kind of a steady year, it's kind of okay. We do have a port strike that's just on the
we
verge.
didn't even get into the port strike, but
There's a
but,
hurricane,
you know,
and
yeah.
we do need to see interest rates come down a little bit. We do need some more affordable vehicles to happen, and prices aren't receding as fast as consumers would like. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
Warren, closing thoughts.
I'm looking for the bright shiny star on the hill.
Right.
we may have a
And-
war in the Middle East too. So
Oh well, yeah.
But I'm gonna close on a different approach because they're bright spots. You got new sheet metal coming out in 2025, and some of that sheet metal is the most spectacular stuff that's ever been launched, both on the BEV side and on the ICE side. Okay, new stuff. We'll all go get to see them at auto shows and all of that. Okay, just take a look at the car and truck of the year nominees in terms of that type of quality product that exists in the market. So I'd say that's a positive. What may overcome it, and one that I've written about, is no matter who's president, the protectionist sentiment drum is beating very, very hard. Harder than it ever did when we convinced the Japanese to do voluntary export restraints.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was a modicum of protectionism. Fast forward 25 years later, Japanese are building vehicles in the United States with American labor, and they're higher reliability and better priced. So I see protectionist sentiment coming. I see a renegotiation of USMCA. I see some type of potential Section 232 national security clause being implemented by whoever is elected president. I would say both are going to do that. So while I think the business is running, maybe not at trend, okay, and maybe we stumble a couple of quarters, there will be growth, and new sheet metal will attract customers. Those interest rates, I agree, need to come down. I am worried that from the stuff I've read that Congress wants to do, we have, and this is my phrase, we have donuts disguised as carrots. Okay, we don't need to feed people donuts to get them fat through protection and make that in the guise of giving them carrots to be more competitive. Okay, I see in the next 5 or 6 years, there could be yet another automotive company in North America go under.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way they're not is if we build a wall, and I'm not talking about immigration. I'm talking about a wall that keeps Chinese vehicles from coming to the United States, either imported through the port of Los Angeles or imported from Mexico. Okay. If I said it once in this particular series, if you can't compete in the car business with the Asians, then how are you going to compete with the Chinese? And the sooner you get to I like what Farley's doing on the low cost stuff from Ford, I think has some advantages. if they execute that program correctly. So there are things that are going on, and those are bright, shiny things. But look for the protectionist sentiment. I'm sorry to end it on Gary, on such a negative note, but we all have to keep our eyes open on that.
Well, yeah, I'm going to end it on a high note because my observation picks up on what you said. There's nothing wrong with this business that new product can't fix.
Yep.
And there's a lot coming next year, and there's a bunch more in the pipeline later in this decade. So that's what I'm going to count on is the industry to really hone its competitive skills and come out
including
with great
economies of scale on the battery electric stuff.
All that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Stephanie, thanks so much for being here. Warren, you too, and Gary. I will not be here next week.
We will be here next week.
But you will be here.
You will be here next week.
Okay. And so I hope all of you out there. Thanks for watching.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.